Hello and welcome to Cycles of Time, your weekly guide to what's happening on Earth as we make our revolutionary journey around the sun. For time immemorial, our human ancestors have created myths and meanings to help us adapt and thrive as seasons change. Join me each week to explore the intersections of these ancient cycles, from the indigenous medicine wheel to the pagan wheel of the year, the Babylonian and Greek zodiac to the I Ching, the ancient Chinese book of changes. I'm your host, Alison Dale, and this is the Cycles of Time podcast. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Cycles of Time podcast. This is your weekly forecast for the week of September 8th through 14th, 2025. And I'm calling this episode Imagination Leads to Realization. Enter the Eclipse Portal. We just had a lunar eclipse in Pisces across the sky from the sun in Virgo yesterday, September 7th, on Sunday. And that really brings us fully into the eclipse portal, which is this 2-week period between the lunar eclipse and the solar eclipse in Virgo, which is on September 21st. And that's the day right before the equinox, the fall equinox here in the Northern Hemisphere, when we enter Libra season and celebrate Mabon in the pagan wheel of the year. And so up until Libra season, the remainder of Virgo season, we are in this eclipse portal. And this week, in between eclipses, the sun is traveling through the gate of imagination, gate 64 in the human design mandala. And then on Tuesday into Wednesday leads into the gate of realization, gate 47. And so today we're going to be focusing on that. This week is a special week because I have a special guest on the podcast. Her name is Kodie Smiley, and we are talking today together because we both have birthdays this week. My birthday is Monday, September 8th, and hers is Tuesday, September 9th. So we both were born within the gate of confusion or imagination in the human design mandala in this middle degree of Virgo. We're midway through Virgo season right now. And so we talked a little bit last week about gate 64, confusion and imagination. And that was the gate where the sun was when the lunar eclipse in Pisces happened yesterday on September 7th. And it was across the sky from the moon in gate 63. So these are the last two gates or hexagrams of the I Ching, of the entire mandala. And so they're pretty interesting to think about, kind of like an epilogue to the Book of Changes as we prepare to wrap up one cycle and begin a new cycle. So I've always been really curious to dive into this gate with another person who has familiarity with these energies and also has an expression of this gate in their chart. And so Kodie and I came together quite spontaneously. We found each other through the digital realm, through mutual friends, and I have been meaning to have a conversation for almost a year now, just feeling like it was really appropriate because we both do very similar kinds of work in the world. We both consider ourselves synthesizers, bringing together information from a lot of different esoteric systems and combining them into kind of the essence or what we feel to be an embodied and lived experience of the sun's transits through these different gates. So it was really fascinating to get connected with Kodie and learn about the work she's doing. Heavenly Bodies and Astrosomatics feel very similar in that we're both bringing information from the transits of the planets above and how they affect the seasons of the earth that we stand on, and then how that comes through in our embodied and emotional sensibility, our conscious awareness. So it's always been just fascinating to know that we have the same gate, this confusion, imagination, illumination gate for our conscious sun. And the sun in human design, the conscious sun, where the sun was when you were born, is said to be about 70% of the information in your chart. It's a really important and powerful placement where all the other planets have a lot of insights and a lot to say about our conscious and subconscious ways of being, but the sun is a very important one. And I've always found it really interesting to dive into the sun gates as kind of a more specific uh, definition of the zodiac sun sign. I came into this work with knowing that I was a Virgo from a young age, but having the knowledge that I'm a Virgo with gate 64 is really illuminating. It brings up a lot of very specific information about my radiance. And so to be able to share that with someone else who has chosen a very similar path and has the same sun gate, it's really exciting. So I think you're going to really enjoy this conversation. It's less of a forecast for the week ahead. I'm not going to go through the entire Wheel of the Year human mandala of the cycles of time like I normally do. If you'd like to see that, it is on Substack at cyclesoftime.substack.com. And you can always find in each episode, each article, there will be a visualization of the mandala of the Wheel of the Year from this polycultural perspective. And I invite you to go there to subscribe. I always put out a lot of bonus material on Substack beyond what is on the podcast elsewhere. Subscribing and getting it in your inbox or in the Substack app is a great way to engage with this material a little deeper. So I invite you to join there. Paid subscribers get a lot of extra goodies as well, including a monthly breathwork session that's related to the zodiac season that we're in, and guidebook, workbook with journaling prompts and somatic exercises that I put out every month as well. And so, yeah, join as a paid subscriber to kind of get in a little deeper to walking the wheel of the year together. And this week, September 8th to 14th, we're finishing up the Gate of Imagination that we've been in since last Thursday, Friday. And that was the gate where the sun was on the lunar eclipse in Pisces on September 7th, Sunday. So, Gate 64, we will talk a lot about in this episode. And then from Wednesday through the weekend, the sun's moving into Gate 47, which is the gate of realization. So, imagination leads to realization. And these two gates are actually connected in the human design body graph. They connect the head center to the ajna or third eye center. And so not only are they happening one after another in Virgo season as the sun transits through, but they also do connect. These dots connect these two energy centers in the body between the third eye and the head, so places of wisdom and insight. And so we'll talk a little bit about both gates. Kodie has a nice insight about the gate of realization, gate 47, at the end of our conversation. But mostly we're focusing on imagination and how the state of confusion and chaos can really lead to imagination and illumination when we allow ourselves to be in that place for long enough. And during eclipse season and this eclipse portal that we're in between the lunar eclipse on Sunday the 7th and the solar eclipse on Saturday or on the 1st of September, we're deep in eclipse portal, and it can feel confusing for sure. So a lot of this conversation is about the illuminating insights that can come through that place. So I hope that it serves you. It was super fun talking to Kodie. I'll tell you a little bit about her here before we dive in. Kodie Smiley is a podcaster, writer, and devoted student of the esoteric sciences. With a deep curiosity for the unseen forces that shape our lives, Kodie explores the ways cosmic influences move through both our physical bodies and our more subtle energetic forms. Her works weave prose artistry, contemplation, and inquiry, inviting others into a deeper relationship with the rhythms of the cosmos and the wisdom within themselves. Through her podcast and writing, Kodie creates spaces where the mystical and the everyday meet, helping others attune to the patterns of the universe and discover new ways of knowing. So, Kodie's podcast is called The Observatory, and you can find it anywhere you listen to podcasts, or you can find her on Instagram at kodie.smiley. And she has a lot of really beautiful insights about the gates of the year as we're moving through them. And so, for another insight and another way to go deeper, especially into the circuitry and how it relates to our embodiment of these gates. She is a human design reflector. And so, with that alone, she brings a really beautiful embodied way of really appreciating the transits as they come through and feeling into them. And so, we're coming from different backgrounds, different perspectives, but have landed into this beautiful synergy. So I hope you enjoy the conversation. Here is Imagination Leads to Realization with me and Kodie Smiley. Enjoy. I'm really excited to have you here, Kodie. Thanks for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me. We've been talking about this for probably a year. Finally getting together and chatting, and I've found it so cool to watch your work in the world and see kind of the comparisons, but also the differences, like the intersections of them, but also how we're obviously like we can be a 64 sun and still be massively different in the way that we perceive and understand the world, and then also dissect it and share it out there. And so it's been cool because you're like, I think are you a 1-3
No, I'm
or
a 5-1.
you're a 5-1? I knew there was a 1 in there because often I get like overwhelmed by information. I have like the lowest amount of ones. And so when I come to your information, it's like I'm hungry and I'm ready to like really take things in a very like dense, informative way, and, like, it's been really cool to see that, whereas, like, I feel like the 6 I'm a 6-3 reflector, and the 6 kind of being in that solar plexus binary, it's, like, a lot about vibes and the feeling and, like, I feel like it's a little bit more what's the word? I wanna use whimsical, but, like, musical,
Like, it,
not as, like, down in the nitty-gritty, but it's been, like, when I come to your information, I'm taking in deeply. Like, I have to prepare my vessel because 'cause I'm like, "Oh, we're diving in here." So I've so loved, like, watching your work in the world.
oh, you too. Yeah, seeing how you've evolved. And I mean, I don't know how it was that we initially met. We have some mutual friends, both
Yeah,
locally where I am in Santa Fe and then through the digital realms. And so I think it all just kind of converged in the proper timing as it was supposed to.
yeah,
But I remember,
yeah,
yeah, discovering your work and being like, wow, this is the most similar kind of interpretation or just kind of way of presenting human design that I've ever seen to the way that I'm experiencing it, which is kind of associating it through the seasons, through a lived experience of the transits and how that relates to the zodiac seasons and also how it relates to embodiment practices. And yeah, I would love it if you could share a little bit about your work is currently under the title Heavenly Bodies.
yeah,
Is that right? And that speaks of the kind of 6th line versus the 1st line, like cycles of time. It feels very like this is the nitty-gritty of
yeah,
what's happening. The Earth's revolving around the sun is how I present it. It's very almost scientific and
yeah,
investigative, which is just my background, and it's how I kinda came to it through this very, yeah, one line type of experience. And so the 6th line being on the roof, whereas the one's on the basement. It's like the 6 is looking up to the heavenly bodies and that ethereal way of kind of bringing in the circuits and the flow of it all together. And so I feel like we're doing very similar work, but it's from a different part of the house or a different angle. So, yeah,
yeah.
if you could just explain in your own words what work it is that you do or just anything more that you'd like to share about yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I also am so curious to see, like, if there's any, like, similarities with your own experience of all of this, like, explore that as well as I, like, kinda open up and talk about it. Heavenly bodies is something that I recently kind of evolved into on the Substack, and it's been a term that I've been using for the past year to kind of explain and describe how it is that I orient myself to these energies. And I think similarly in our work, we're seeing as this like it became like profoundly apparent to me how the sun passing through each of these gates was not only happening as this like kind of cosmic intervention influence, but also like literally in the physicality of my body, and that the heavenly bodies above are in this that we are also our own kind of heavenly body below. And so I kind of see things from that realm, and as one does, I've continued to evolve, and it's, like, taken all these different shapes and forms, and I'm a very mutable creature, so it's, like, I often find myself in, like, internet spaces, like, I should probably, like, find some sort of consistency with container and, like, how I just but I've just been on such a personal journey as of late, recently separated from my partner and newly single mom and making my way in the world in, like, this new kind of matured version of myself and trying I think, like, right now as we're recording, I'm literally going through this whole, like I mean, it's our birthday's coming up soon, so, right, like, we're kind of coming into this next cycle, this new cycle of our year, and, this one feels really profound, and so, like, as far as my work, I don't know where it's gonna land. I love contemplating these things, I love watching the influence and how I can literally, like I can contemplate each of the solar transits energies and see how it's, like, impacting my daily life and in a very real, not only philosophical or mental realm, but in my body as well, and so that's the way that, yeah, I've kind of approached it, and from this kind of experimental, like, a lot of the passion that went into these projects and these ways that I was approaching it was from the background of human design. I'm now kind of getting more information on the astrology side of things through your information and also other containers. But human design was really the system that brought me into this awareness. As a 64, I believe that this is a very 64 thing. I saw that it's the same thing, right? Like, for my whole life, I'm like, uh, in church or in this thing, I'm like, "It's all connected. Do we all see how it's all the same thing?" I woke up and I went, the I Ching and human design and all of these systems that come together to create human design are literally describing the same thing, and human design is just this more modern, updated version, this, like, newer technology of what we've been talking about for thousands and thousands of years. And so a lot of my passion to, like, translate and understand it was a lot about restoring the root stock. The way that, like, these newer technologies come onto the scene, and it's like, "Wow, look at this new thing that's been discovered." It's like, "No, this is as old as time. This has always been." This is a study of consciousness and the way that we project ourselves onto, the nature of reality, essentially, and so, yeah, I guess I've been talking for a minute, but I'm also curious too, like, that everything is everything energy. I'm so curious if that's, like, been a part of your work too, like, "Whoa, okay, let's just talk about this."
Yes. Oh my gosh. Everything you just said it resonates so deeply. And I think for my whole life, it has been that way, which I love looking at 64, the gate of confusion and imagination. And I always call it the gate of confusion and imagination because I think I'm like moving away from feeling confused all the time and
Yeah.
and that's the thing with the gene keys is there's this way of describing an evolution of the same energy but in different frequencies. And so confusion to imagination to illumination, where it's like just this clarity of like a bolt of light coming through the window and just illuminating everything and being like, it's all here, it's all the same, it's all part of the same sauce. But yeah, I think as a young one and all the way through college I was always trying to put too many pieces together for academia, for example. I'd be like, oh, I need to talk about the evolution of the brain and the history of consciousness and how that also relates to like mimic the evolution of culture. And I ended up studying anthropology in college because it felt like the most broad-based thing that could still be a discipline, but it was like, "Oh, I wanna study all the subdisciplines of this and just learn about basically humanity's interface with the natural world and with the cosmos and with all of it." And so I kind of jumped in there, but I remember feeling really frustrated in a lot of my classes because I couldn't go there. It was like, "Okay,"
Yeah.
I looked at it a little bit like, "Wow, that was a nice paper, but you need to be a lot more specific, you need to break things down." And I was like, "Okay, but I'm kind of more about gathering things together and, like, there is a lot of breakdown already in the world of subdisciplines." And, I think in our culture, especially, there's so many specialists, right? And you don't wanna be the jack of all trades, that's seen as a bad thing, right? So you're kind of like, "Oh, I gotta find that thing that I'm gonna specialize in." And then I think, yeah, at a certain point in my life, as I got deeper into these things, these kind of more esoteric ways of understanding the world through the ancients, through like the ways that people used to see cycles through the zodiac and the I Ching and the medicine wheel and the, five elements, like all of these different like wheels, we were more connected, I think, individuals, not just the shamans or not just the leaders, but everybody had a certain connection to the cyclical nature of the world. And, we were born in a time where there was just so much specialization that was already happening. And so
Yeah.
everybody had their role, right? And so to try to fight against that in, as a kid and in high school, college, it was like really, I felt just really like on the outside and kind of a little bit crazy sometimes. But now, yeah, to have it all come together. And, I love that you bring in the embodiment piece of it too, because that was the final piece for me. Like intellectually, I could look at books and see how like the whooshing cycle is an elemental cycle that relates to the elemental cycle of the medicine wheel, that relates to the elemental cycle of the zodiac, and how they're all a little bit different, but they're saying very similar things about just how we live on this earth and within this solar system. But then the embodiment piece for me came a lot later. I think connecting it to lived experience of like how I feel, that felt a little more like radical somehow, like, oh, well, that all can exist out there, the history, the books, the texts, and even the astronomy, but, like, bringing it into a felt experience was harder. And when I finally clicked on that and kind of chose the term astrosomatics for my Substack a few years ago, I woke up in the middle of the night with like, "Yes, okay," like, it feels similar to celest or to heavenly bodies, right? Like, the astrosomatics, heavenly body, very parallel in the sense of what we're talking about, where it's like, oh,
They're
yeah, it's
like
not
the
just about what's up there, because astrology, like, I've always loved it, but sometimes it's felt a little hard to, like, relate to other people in the world who, if you're not into astrology and an astrologer starts going off, it can be a little bit,
yeah,
like, this yeah, like, well, I don't know if I buy into that, but when it's like, no, there's this embodied experience of just living it rather than just talking about it. So yeah, I love just the fact that we both have the same birthday gate and the 64. It makes so much sense that we would, yeah, kind of come to this and also that it's been a challenge in some ways to and it still is sometimes, right? To live in that space that's kind of liminal and kind of everything is everything, like you said. Yeah.
well, I was really resonating with what you were talking about as far as, like, "Hey, guys, it's all" do we all see, like, how it's relating? You know, the frustration where and I still meet this quite a bit with, like I can be, like, a very tribal person in the sense that I'm like, I wanna all of us can be, right? Like, we're evolved to be together, but it's like, you don't see how that's connected, but that is this kind of 64 quality that's like, here it all is, and it can be this, like, really overwhelming thing because you want to just keep and this is our design is also design sun is 45, the gatherer,
Mhm. Yep.
and so there is this, like, desire to, like, bring it to a close, like, to biting through. It's like there's a lot of tension in knowing that it's all related and how much do we gather? When is enough enough? Like, what is the cauldron that we're alchemizing and relating to one another and figuring out? And so I was really resonating with that part because 'cause I've always felt that keen sense of frustration, like, as
Mhm.
far as, like, the information goes and, like, there's not enough time. Not enough time to know all of it.
Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah, I'm always so amazed by people who, like, use their one thing, they focus on it, and then they become known for it, and I feel like when I learned about fascia, those kind of unknown, understudied tissue that connects all of our organs together and, like, connects our body, I feel like the 64 is kind of like fascia in the body, where it's like, it is this connective tissue, like, in ancient times or, like, throughout medical history where the way of learning about something is by dissecting you're dissecting the fascia out, right? The connections and the interwoven parts so that you can see the heart or the liver or whatever. And Even like that bodies exhibit where they dissolve the bodies and inject something into the nervous system or whatever it is so that that's what's remaining. It's like you can't really inject a substance into fascia to like make it. I don't think so. Maybe somebody's done this, but to like show that that is the substrate that it all exists within. And I think when I started learning more about that, just as like a body part that is so that not many people are too familiar with, I was like, oh yeah, 64, this kind of energy of it all being held by something is kind of invisible, yet at the same time, you
Yeah.
know? And yeah, but it makes it challenging to just interact in like the default world sometimes. Yeah, and the 45, I mean, that's so interesting you bring up the design sun. My conscious north node is also in 45, so it feels like a
Oh.
double whammy of that gatherer energy to really want to bring things together for the benefit of community and for the
Mhm.
benefit of others, and when it feels misunderstood or like it's too complex, it can be, yeah, a bit like yeah, definitely frustrating, as you mentioned, but I think that's why when I meet someone who's also living in this kind of multidimensional, you contain multitudes kind of space, it feels really just like, "Yes!" You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You hit me. Like our mutual friend Jonathan.
Mhm. Yeah,
We were
Jonathan
talking
Poe.
about how like, it's like that same energy, but, like, the other side of the coin almost, and there's so much, like, juice that comes up through that, that I've so enjoyed. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, within this past year, I've connected with you and with Jonathan Coe, and then with Britton LaRue, who also has the same birthday gate as Jonathan. So it's like we're
Mhm.
here on the Virgo side and they're on the Pisces side of this 63, 64 axis, all
Mm.
working in kind of multidimensional, mutable type of astrology or human design, and usually merging all of it kind of thing. And it's been really fun to see the different perspectives there and how people are taking it. But feels like medicine for these times in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And then these eclipses that, you know, this eclipse that just happened on the 7th of September. And yeah, my birthday is the 8th, yours is the 9th, right? So our sun is getting eclipsed as well as our Earth. The moon will be in our Earth sign or Earth gate of 63. And I'm curious how you're feeling about that. I think the last time an eclipse was on this axis in the same degree was 2006, September 7th, 2006. So that's a long time ago. Yeah, I looked back through my photos, which I'll share later if there's
Yeah.
time. But I was like, looked through back through photos and email and was like, oh, whoa, that was pretty interesting that there was this eclipsed gate 63 in Pisces, yeah, on the exact same day in 2006, and now here we are almost 20 years later
Yeah.
experiencing the same thing, but, yeah, how are you feeling? How are you doing with so much energy and attention with the nodes being so close to your sun and earth?
It feels like system reset a little bit. It feels like this, like, cosmic joke that, like, my life has conspired in such a way to meet up to this point where I could just press, like, Control Alt Delete and become the next thing, like, whatever that is. Any of the ways that I was conditioned to believe I would be a mom or make money in the world or the career that I would take or, like, just even my general persona that I present to the world. It's like I could rewrite it. That's kind of the energy that I've been working with, like, leading up to all of this. I would actually be curious to hear your take on eclipse energy, how you're feeling, and then, like, kind of piece together this what it is that I've because there has been a very strong sense of powerful impact on who I am, just in the world, my sun, like the light that I shine into the world, and that so much of it is evolving. And so it all feels like a very auspicious time. It feels like a very auspicious time. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that, I feel like it's once again one of those things when you get too deep into the weeds in any certain discipline, it can be like just inundating pretty quickly. Like, oh, you're underwater. And I led a breathwork session yesterday with some people, including my mom, who was in the session, who didn't know anything about eclipses astrologically. She was just like, can we see this eclipse? And if we
Yeah.
can't, does it matter? It's kind of usually. in most of the world, we pay attention to eclipses if we know they're going to be passing over us and we can go and put our glasses on or do whatever it is that we do in our culture. But astrologically, there's a lot to it, and just looking back through cultures across the globe of how they've looked at eclipses throughout time, which is kind of a disruption or an upset to the normal rhythm of things in a certain way, right? It's like the moon is red and the sun is disappearing. That's kind of, yeah, you can imagine what it would have been like to experience that as somebody a long time ago who didn't really have an understanding of how the planets work in the way that we currently do. But I would say that you're right. There's a lot of kind of conflicting information out there in certain ways, or just a lot of ways to view what eclipses mean. But the lunar eclipse, this September 7th lunar eclipse, is the Earth coming right directly in between the the sun and the moon. And I look at it as like an interplay, the full moons being like this beautiful opportunity to integrate polarities. So like a normal full moon between 63 and 64, Pisces and Virgo would be like a beautiful opportunity to kind of have a heightened awareness of both our emotions, the moon, and our like conscious will, the sun, and how they can like integrate these two seeming opposites across the axis of like 63 being like doubt and curiosity and 64 being confusion and imagination. And it's like I think a normal full moon would be like, oh, let's bring these together, and sun and the moon are reflecting, mirroring each other. So there's more of like an
Mm,
opportunity to see the connection between opposites, seeming opposites.
okay.
And then I would say that an eclipse, when the Earth is coming right between them, for me, the way I look at it is just that like the Earth is our bodies. The Earth is like the
Mhm.
material realm and is the interconnected ecosystem of all people and plants and animals and just the everything that has ever happened on Earth, like the material reality of that. And so for me, I see it as like the Earth comes in between that beautiful mirroring of these two energies and kind of makes us see those energies in a really like concentrated way in the material realm. Like, and so I
Mhm.
love your control alt delete idea of like a reset. For me, I feel like eclipses they happen twice a year, the two different eclipse seasons, so they're fairly regular. But the parts of the sky they're in usually just really like something in our lives tangibly is affected by. Whereas like a normal full moon might be like emotionally we're affected or our mindset is affected, but eclipses feel kind of faded because it's like almost like this alignment of Earth, Sun, and Moon is conspiring for something in real life to happen, like that feels kind of outside of ourselves. So that's how I see it. And again, there's so many ways of thinking about what this might mean, but there's definitely just a lot of attention in the astrology world and the human design world as well, that
Yeah.
as far as like, okay, this is 63, 64 on the tips of people's tongues right now. So,
It also feels like listening to you describe that, it feels like to me like the kind of central place to look is or the way that what it oriented me towards was my 63. And a thought that I've been having as of late is about trusting my doubt, how I haven't inherently trusted when I've been doubtful of a person, a circumstance, a situation in my life. And that doubt is actually like it's an intelligence, like it's signaling, it's signaling something to us, like this kind of suspiciousness that
mhm,
alerts us towards like what might be out of alignment, not, within our realm of what's the word I want to like, I'm almost like the word that's coming to mind is like homeostasis, like what is kind of like the thing that's throwing it all out, that's
mm,
maybe needing to be excluded from the picture or included, but yeah, like, whenever you're talking, I'm like, "Oh, okay, this understanding of doubt." Whereas, like, confusion for me, the shadow of 64, I'm often, like, centered on that, right? Our conscious will, I'm, like, kind of always in this realm of, like, "Oh, I'm confused," but doubt as that kind of opposing end is the anchor of, like, this is something to look at. This is the question mark of it all. That
Mhm.
and like in the context of this eclipse, I think is like a really, yeah, a potent orientation. I feel like that is helping so much for me to understand this control alt delete moment I'm having that is like trust your doubt. Trust those moments that you have been in doubt throughout your life or, cycles or patterns that continue to loop in your life. So,
I love that. Yeah, that does make a lot of sense.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, yeah, the moon is the thing that we're looking towards, this eclipse and this season where it's like this shadow. I mean, not in the US, we won't see it, but a lot of the world will be seeing this eclipse, and it's like the shadow of the earth is coming over, and then right after that, it's almost like the lights are turned off in a room, and then when you turn the lights back on, the furniture is like rearranged and you don't know where anything is. It's
Yeah.
this kind of energy of like, okay, there, what's happening there? And then it's like, poof, there's a deep kind of epiphany or realization about the energies that are centered on that part of the sky. And so, yeah, reorienting doubt and trusting. And I love that, trusting doubt more rather than being like, oh, I shouldn't be so doubtful. I shouldn't, shaming ourselves for like that's not a good thing to be. It's like, yeah, that is a way of knowing. And in Pisces, it's like an intuitive way of
Yeah.
knowing. Sometimes I've felt like confusion, imagination should be in Pisces and, like, doubt, curiosity should be in Virgo because Virgos are
Yeah.
kind of known to doubt and, like, nitpick and be like, "Are you sure about that?" Like, "I already knew," you know? So I've always thought it was interesting that they were in opposite signs,
Yeah.
in some way, but it makes sense that, like, doubt being in, like, a kind of Piscean intuitive type of feeling makes sense there to me.
And that it's like it's also kind of that paradoxical nature of 64, 63. Like what you believe should be Pisces is Virgo and vice versa. It is like literally it is that kind of, yeah, it's disorienting. But so when we were going through 63 earlier in Pisces season, I think like part of that archetype that has been created is this very like, I don't know. I'm very, like everything is everything and I'm not sure and very like murky waters almost sort of context to it. And that when we went through 63, that quality of Pisces was like, no, there is a deep clarity that is very much available to that Piscean realm. Like, I feel like that's just kind of, yeah, that's kind of this quality that we're speaking of right now. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and a lot of attention is on that right now, on,
Yeah.
like, surrendering to the unknown, but also not, like, becoming a soup and not because we have Saturn just re-entered Pisces,
Yeah.
for the next 6 months after spending some time in Aries and kind of like the final master of that like, time in that sign.
Mhm.
And so having Saturn co-present with this eclipse, and it's at the late degrees of Pisces, so it's not in the 63, 64, but it's still in Pisces, and so it's bringing that, like, kind of structure to the unknown or to that murkiness, and so I
Mm.
love what you're saying about, yeah, kind of reorienting doubt as a way of, like, saying, like, "This is something I should trust and not just assume that because I'm in the waters, I'm wishy-washy." It's, like, actually learning how to swim through the waters, with, certain grace and, like, strategy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, like, to me, this, like, really applies in, like, kind of our circles of, like, esoteric thought. It's like, what is gonna happen, and it's like, no big deal, and, like, kind of allow things to evolve, everything's on a cycle, but this quality to me is like, yeah, but also you're the alchemist, and you kind of do decide what gets put into this cauldron of your life and your experience. And like one of my favorite books that I've read this year is that has like totally just, I think, changed the way that I see these energies. Additionally, is The Spell of the Sensuous by
Oh my
David A.
gosh, I cannot believe you said that is on my bedside table right now.
But this concept of perceptual participation, um, that what we perceive is, like, literally a act of conscious participation with our living world, with the ecosystem of our life, and so, in that way, the 64 and what we're talking about, how we've had this experience of our whole life of, like, what do we put in the cauldron, you know? That book has changed my life in the sense that I can now, like, see it as an active participation with my reality, that there is a conscious choice and, like, yeah, this kind of quality of, like, clarity in the 63 of doubt has helped me, like, balance those 2 energies instead of being all 64 and, like, not trusting that, that Piscean side of the coin.
Mm,
So,
yes.
yeah.
Wow, I can't believe you're reading that too. How appropriate, how
Yeah.
perfect. Yeah, I started reading it earlier in the year, probably in Pisces season, and then put it down for a while and have just picked it up
Yeah.
again. But yeah, perceptual participation, I mean, feels very quantum physics, right? It's like that how we perceive things is going to determine whether it's a wave or a point. And that I think
Mhm.
the more that we understand about the nature of reality through the quantum realm, that's still so new to us we still very much operate under this kind of mechanical physics, Newtonian physics kind of way in the world where like one thing hits another and then it hits another and it's a machine, but it's not actually that way. And I do feel like that's a lot of what's rising to the surface with this transit through the sixth sun in 64 and the moon through 63 for this eclipse is a recognition of that, of like, yeah, our participation with the universe does change, like you create your own reality, but not like necessarily through this way of manifesting where you're like, I'm going to just set my intentions to it and then it's going to happen. Cause that's almost too mechanical, right? It's like, it's more of, yeah, perceptive participation is such a beautiful way
Yeah.
to phrase it. Yeah.
And with all of this, that I feel like what's kind of become or another kind of symptom of it all has been my contemplation upon, like, the quantum state of chaos, and I think that's confusion.
Mhm.
And, I'm always kind of reading this book. It's Yin Mysticism by Brynja Magnuson, and one of the chapters is chaos, and it talks about how in these states of chaos, there's the energy scattered in the field. There's potential for manifestation, but we're not yet aware of how that organization of manifestation is gonna take place. It's a place of potentiality, and the energy isn't consolidated yet. So it's this state where we're kind of swept to the wind, and, yeah, I think there's a quality of that that's like, can you allow yourself to remember and feel those states of chaos? Like, "Oh, there's not a lot to work with here. I'm not quite sure, and can I be in trust with what is organizing?" It's like an emergence. Like, can I
Mm.
be tuned into what is emerging through me as the vessel? But yeah, that I wanted to bring that part of the quantum chaos up because it has we're touching it anyway. It's a part of what we're saying, but yeah, that's also been
I'd love to read that. That sounds really.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, I love that visual of it like a congealing or kind of like it's like this gaseous particles that are floating at any given moment and could take any shape. And it's like the illumination city of 64 is kind of just like that's the moment where it takes shape and it's like instantaneous. And it's
mhm,
not you're not going to get necessarily a hint of what that is. You can imagine that it might be this or it might be that. And so staying in that imaginal space and then that'll allow you to be ready for when there is an illumination of like, that's it. Without trying to like rush an answer. So yeah, beautiful imagery there. I love that.
yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, for those of you listening, if you're out there and don't know about the I Ching or human design as much, basically, there's 64 gates. If you're listening to this, you probably know that by this point. There's 64 hexagrams, 64 gates, or 64 gene keys. They're all based on this beautiful I Ching divination of these 64 energies that are tied into our amino acids and genetic code as well. It's this beautiful, beautiful cycle. But like the 1 and 2 are solid yang and solid yin. And so it's like the creative, solid yang, number 1, and number 2 is the receptive, which is solid yin. And then you get to the end, 63 and 64, and they're kind of like the way I've heard them described as like the epilogue of the book, whereas like 1 and 2 are like the prologue that set everything up. And then you go through 3 through 62, right? Where it's just all the possible combinations of different elemental energies. And then you get to the 63, 64, and it's 63 is known as after completion. And then 64 is before completion. So it's like you mentioned, paradoxical, where it's like, okay, we've already reached completion and now we're before it again. Just really iterating that like there is no end to this book. The Book of Changes is very much a cycle, and very much at that very end gate, we have that imaginal cell, kind of like the chrysalis. I've been seeing so many images around this eclipse and around this season of chrysalis and of like the emergent, like the goo that the butterfly, the caterpillar must dissolve into before becoming a butterfly, and complete absorption and dissolving into, yeah, that fascia or that, universal chaos stuff before it can become anything in the next cycle. And I feel like that, yeah, is just a really beautiful way to approach this season. Is like once you think you've come to an answer and you've used your doubt to like secure an answer, there's still something that's like beyond, that's like hasn't been illuminated yet. But it will, I guess.
I know I was trying to remember as you're talking, I was reviewing right before we got on the call in the I Ching, the structure or like the elemental structure of 64 is fire above, water below, I believe. And then is 63 heaven above, earth below? Do you remember?
I should know that. I have my new cards, which I'm very excited about. And that has all the information. I made this deck
You
recently.
made it?
Yeah, it's called Mandala 64. I'm gonna start making it available soon. This is my prototype, but
Oh,
it has all of the planets, the, like, conscious and
whoa.
unconscious planets, not to distract. I just thought sometimes I'm like, "I gotta look that up," but I find that looking things up on the internet related to these interconnected
Yeah.
systems can actually be harder than a
Yes.
physical thing. So I'm like, "Okay." I have, yeah, confusion on this side for 64 and then imagination. So it's kind of like you can, but it has the I Ching, yeah, so fire over water is 64, and then let me find 63 really quickly just so we can confirm. Hopefully, it'll be quick. But yeah, fire over water is interesting because fire rises up and water seeps down is the way I've heard it described, like, just energetically. So they're not
Yeah.
meeting each other, they're, like, going in opposite directions.
And then,
Um,
yeah, my part of
60
that
Oh,
what
go
is it?
ahead.
Oh,
Go
sorry.
ahead. No,
Well,
60
part of it was like, okay, is after completion coming together, and then, 64 is the state of like, yeah, pulling apart. There's
Yeah, kinda. I was so 63 is water over fire, it's the opposite of, so we have, yeah, these opposite, I put these little icons of fire and water
okay.
on there too, but, so water over fire would be like a cauldron, it's like what you're talking about, it's like a pot of water over fire will boil, it'll come to a place where it's like, "Oh, it's all coming together," right? It's at that boiling point. But then the fact that the next one is fire over water, they're flipped, and it's like, well, water is running down into the ground, fire is rising up, and they don't seem like they're ever gonna connect, so it is confusing, right? It's like, and that's the place where you recognize that we're in a never-ending story, and you can't find like, check off the box, like, plateau of, like, satisfaction, I guess, of, like, "It's
Yeah,
over," you know?
yeah, it's kind of reminding me of and I'm gonna totally space, like, this I'm gonna speak to the sentiment, but it's in one of Steiner's works, one of his books, speaking to this kind of internal process of self-initiation. One of the qualities of these self-initiations we go through is, like, the discernment of what gets excluded, and that almost feels a little bit like, as you were showing me those, I was seeing how often Virgo is talked about as, as the manifestation, as what's coming together, but I think what's cool that we both find in our works is that the gates really help to further illuminate these archetypes that, like, differentiate them in, like, a really colorful, beautiful way, where, like, because everything is so relative, we can assign Pisces quality to Virgo and vice versa because they're holding each other together at the opposite ends of paradox, but and the spectrum. But to me, what like a differentiating character, perhaps, I'd be curious on like your take on this, is that Virgo has this discerning quality that's actually about exclusion. And not exclusion in like any sort of, but just a discrimination of like this doesn't belong. I that was like kind of what was maybe occurring to me as I'm talking. I'm not sure if like, yeah, what you think.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think discernment, I've liked that word as I've discovered it. It feels like discernment is Virgo. And it just feels like, oh, discernment's a good thing. Whereas like nitpickiness or exclusion or like writing something off, like that almost seems like you're doing it just out of spite. But
Mhm.
discernment is very much out of care, right? I'd say
Yeah.
discernment is like, if you look at the harvest maiden or the harvest goddess archetype, it's like during this season, it's really important to focus on like not putting rotten things into the cauldron because this is the time of year where like a lot of people were, pressing cider and gathering all of the apples and I like thinking of apples because apples are delicious, but instead of grain and apples both this time of year feel very like evocative of the season. But if you think about not as many people like go and actually sort wheat from chaff and like actually process grain anymore, so it's less tangible as of an but you can think of an apple and putting it through a press. Like if you put even one rotten apple through a press, it's going to pretty much like ruin the whole batch of cider, right? And so you have to pay attention, and Virgo has to discern what is ripe, what is rotten, what's going to spoil the whole thing because it is starting to really come together and merge during this season in that way where we start processing the harvest. And yeah, so I definitely see that that is the difference, but it has to be unified because it is like merging is a Pisces thing, right? It's all about like dissolving boundaries. But yeah, I've actually never thought exactly of this metaphor before for the apple press, but it makes me really crave some fresh press. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to go apple
Well,
picking, and I'm
yeah,
going to make sure that I'm like not putting a worm in my apples,
yeah,
and it almost requires that like solitude, because you can't really like do that while you're chatting. Like it's that hermit quality of being like, I just have to be like so in what I'm doing. And I
mhm,
think that like that sixth house kind of like, day-to-day tasks and just paying attention to kind of the mundane things. It's like this is the season and the time when it's so important to do that, but to be happy to like not be like slogging away like, "Oh, I'm working, I'm
yeah,
serving everybody else," but being like, "I really feel good about being in more of a sovereign hermit kind of space, gathering these apples and looking at each one and being like, wow, this is going to make, if I do this properly and I discern what's ripe, what's not, it's going to be like the best for everybody, including
yeah,
me." Yeah.
like, there's a very collective well, I mean, trying to think. Yeah, 6 they're all are all of no, it's tribal I'm trying to think I need to just say this out loud. The gates that create Virgo are, I think, a mix between tribal circuitry and collective, right? Yeah,
You
we have
know,
16,
yeah.
37, and
Hmm.
then 6. Yeah, I think it's, somewhere, like and I love
Wonderful.
looking at that kind of context of it all, like, what is the circuitry, kind of what is the en yeah, like, what's the energetic that this is kinda speaking to, and I think that, like, it pulls these qualities forward, and that's what I'm always really interested in is, like, getting to the essence of, like, what is Virgo at its core. It's gonna be related to a lot of different things, and based on who you are, your life circumstances, your astrology, your human design, you're gonna interpret that quality vastly different than, your neighbor and this person and that person, but, like, if we can connect with an essence of a thing, we can then, like, understand and connect to how it's related to everything else around it. And so, like, yeah, this I love, like, this metaphor that you're talking about with the apple. Like, if you put one rotten thing in there, the whole cider batch is toast. Like, it's nobody's gonna drink that. And there is just this, like, collective quality, I personally think, to Virgo that is there's almost like a tint of, like, protective, like, it's this purity thing, right? It's the understanding of, like, what is pure? What is our understanding of purity? And I think, like, we can extrapolate a lot of lessons from even understanding that at its essence too. That, like, purity in and of itself is the protecting mechanism of innocence, of I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, the pure
Of l
cider, the pure cider, I've never thought about
Yeah.
but it's true. It's like the discernment that leads to the purity. And
Mhm.
yeah, it's funny because I don't know how you felt about being a Virgo throughout your life, like, or how you came into this. I always love to ask people about their kind of early on associations with their sun sign, because that's how we always are introduced into these realms. And for me, it was like the Virgin, and okay, cool. And I knew it was, like, supposed to be orderly and neat, but I wasn't as neat and orderly as I was supposed to be, and so I was a little bit, like, miffed about that. And then also, like, the virginal I think in such a patriarchal society, like, the virgin is seen as prude, right? Like, if you have this word virgin, it's like there's the Virgin Mary who's exalted because she, like, gave birth to the Christ child and had a purpose, but otherwise virginality is kind of like prudish, or like, like, don't come over here. And I think that, like, that discerning quality has been in my life. I think in my body, I always, like, just felt it as, like, a negative thing and didn't love being a Virgo, even though somewhere deep down I always related to it, but I was like, "Ooh, the over culture is very much not giving me, like, I'd rather be a kind of anything else, a Pisces for sure, or like a Leo or
Yeah,
whatever." And so,
yeah,
as I've evolved into that and realized, like, how much it is like a male-dominated culture, like, ascribing that and being like, "You shouldn't choose, you should just be available, you shouldn't," and, like, discerning is bad. But I look at, like, the one of the myths of Virgo is Astraea, who's this Greek, like, one of the main primordial goddesses, and she was the last goddess to leave Earth when all the other gods were leaving Earth, because the Earth had gotten so, like, humanity had gotten so corrupt. And so the story is that she stayed as long as she possibly could out of care, where everybody else was like, "Peace, humans, the golden age is over, and now you're killing each other and warring and just being absolutely horrible. So we're all gonna go back up to the heavens, and, like, you do you and whatever." But Astraea was the virgin goddess who was, like, so pure that she was like, "I wanna stay, but this has gotten out of hand, so I'm finally gonna leave and become the constellation Virgo, but I will come back when you get your act together, like, when you're just treating yourself a little bit better, like, I'll be here and I'll be the first to come back." So, like,
mhm.
fascinating, yeah.
Like, as you were saying that, I was getting, like, full body chills, like, thinking about that, because I think that that's something I've always really felt inside of myself too, that is, like, the quality of Virgo in my just in who I am. I will be the last to go to ensure that you know what I mean? Like, there is a determination that is, like, so a part of who I am that, like, really spoke to. Yeah. That's, like, for whatever reason, I think that's just, like, a really what's the word? I think it's a really powerful kind of representation of what this energy could mean. And also, to answer your original question, I did not like being a Virgo. Like, you know, being raised in a time where it was like the cool what were those magazines? Like 17 magazine, and it would, like, have its, like, little I was like, "Do I have to read the Virgo section?" Like,
Uh-huh.
the way that it was translated was so yeah, this, like, clean, orderly, like, nitpicker, and in some ways, like, I'm like, "No, it's standard." It's a
Having
standard.
a standard, yeah,
And I've just
absolutely.
also felt very protective for my whole life of, like, the understanding of Virgo and what the archetype like, what the like, one of the terms that I love to use in my work is heavenly bodies. And I think that when I look at the gates of the I Ching and the intelligence that it brings to the wheel is that these gates builds the heavenly body of Virgo in such a differentiated way that we can also see how who we are. There's a part of us that is Virgo as well. Like, you don't have to be a Virgo sun to begin to understand how Virgo interacts inside of your heavenly body. And so, anyway, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the way that you put it together. I feel like the way that you and I approach these distillations is like you talk about it as like an essence, which I really love. And just kind of like how do these things combine to form this like essential quality? Because it is that fact that like it's not just a flat and linear way of understanding an archetype. It's
Mhm.
like, oh, there's lots of different like facets and fractals and aspects of it. And I think I look at it more as like a storyline, like an evolution of, from the first gate of Virgo season to the last gate of Virgo season. And as they're on the cusps of the, Leo and Libra on the other sides, it's like this, like what is the journey that the archetype has taken throughout that season to learn what they need to learn to go from one to the other. And not as like evolutionary in the sense of like one is lower than the other necessarily, but it's just like it's almost like a journey that you're walking through time. And I think both of those are right, right? It's like they yeah, that journey is never linear, right? We move through time in a kind of fractal way to create this essence of the whole thing. And but I just like, yeah, how we kind of have taken that and been, using a little bit of different words, but it's like doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if, like, some of it lies inside of, like, are you a manifesting generator or generator?
A projector.
A projector? Oh, why
Yeah.
did I think that? You're a projector. Okay, that I'm remembering that now. So, like, just yeah, like, I feel like that plays into, like, the way in which we're gonna orient to like, for me, it's like like, understanding Reflector, what that even means was, like, quite a journey in and of itself, that it's, like, going to come in and connect with an essence and then, like, amplify back out into the world, and so, like, me understanding a quality or an essence has, like, changed the way that I can actually orient to the information and, like, be reflective of it, and so now I'm like, yeah, I'm thinking of it from or, like, what you were just saying there was, like, that's, like, this energetic orientation or even, like, auric orientation, perhaps you could say, or presence maybe, but anyway,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
digress.
No, I think that's interesting being, yeah, I'd love to learn to hear more about what it feels like to be a reflector. Reflectors are, yeah, so I know several reflectors, but obviously it's a very rare type where there's no defined centers in the body graph. And I was about to ask you, like, do you have the 63-4 channel or the 64-47 channel? I'm like, no, of course you don't, because you don't have it. You are fully, yeah, open centers. And yeah, I guess like what does that feel like being a reflector generally, and also, yeah, with the 63-64 being hanging gates, like, I guess, yeah, you did just describe it as like
Yeah,
the bringing in information and amplifying it back out and
yeah,
reflecting, but
yeah. Like, I'm never gonna it's just this, like it's been this awareness that I'm never going to really land in one place on one thing. It's, like, gonna be a constant evolution. As the cycles of time evolve around me, like, how can I be in surrender and flow to that evolutionary process? And also what I think is it's, like, the most obvious, but, like, also I think when you get into a system like human design, it's really easy to get really attached to, like, the types and hyperfixate, and I'm like, "Oh, I'm this type." We love having that kind of certainty or that solidity to, like, hold on to, but to me, the reflector is reflecting this thing that is about everybody, about all the types, which is that, like, we are all here to evolve and move with the cycles of time and, you know, like, be in this kind of constant ebb and flow of consciousness, and, like, that isn't one state of being or, like, for one type. That is like, I think all of the types, and this is the way that yeah, that I understand types or, like, kind of lend their importance, is that the people in our life are reflections of these modes of consciousness coming through. And so the projector can, like, show us very specific ways of seeing something, you know, of, like, understanding reality. Also, they're, like, deeply attuned to the response system where there is, like, an abundance of energy and, like, consolidated, organized systems of information. So I really tend towards, like, the types being this way that we can see ourselves, like, ways that we're all meant to kind of move in the world. We're all here to respond. We're all here to, like, wait for an invitation or be invited into our lives, and so that was, like, kind of a dancing way around. I really have always had, like, this aversion to, like, getting too hung up on the type. I mean, I definitely had, like I was like, "Oh, that's really cool. I'm a reflector. Like,
Mhm.
I'm gonna hop on this train for a minute and just feel so special." But also then realizing, like, this is just a, you know, a reflective prism of consciousness, like what we all are anyway. So that's not like a really solid answer. It's like some weird way of dancing around specialness.
You are so
But like
special,
but
and that's
like
a beautiful way of putting it. Yeah.
But that everybody, you know, like, it
Mhm.
is that understanding that we all have that inherent quality and we are defined by it in many different ways, and the heavenly bodies help us to understand that, but, like yeah, anyway.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like no snowflake is the same as another snowflake, but you can be like, "Oh, there's, like, those, like, crunchy kind of snowflakes, and then there's those, like, really wet ones and the lumpy ones," with no value judgment to any one of them, but it is,
Yeah,
like, putting snowflakes that are all very different, fingerprints that are all different into types. It makes sense, and types came later in the human design, information as far as the synthesis of all of these ancient systems came first, where it was complex and then at one point, like, Human Design 2.0 came along where it was like, "Oh, let's put these into these types to make it more approachable maybe, or just because we can." And then I think that's when it really took off because people could be like, "Oh, that, like, really is actionable. It makes sense to me. Like, it's a way to enter the system." But I find that most people who go beyond the surface level of human design. They all kind of hate types because they're like, "Oh, it's just clumping you into something that, like, is not the extent of it. You're much more unique
yeah.
than that." And similar to astrology, it's like, "Oh, you're a Virgo." It's like, "Well, no, but you also have all these other planetary aspects and the house system." Like, there's so much more, and so I think that once anybody gets deeper into these systems, generally everybody's gonna be like, "That's not the full of it, so please don't, like, throw the baby out with the bathwater if you don't
Yeah,
resonate." Because I know so many generators who are like, "I just hate human design because I found out I was a generator, and that was, like, the boring one that everybody is, and so I decided to just, like, screw that. I feel more unique than that, so I'm not gonna learn any more about it." I met so many people who are like, "Oh, you're a human design person, like, ooh, I that just seems too pigeonholy," and I'm like, "No, like, the complexity, come join us for this complex
yeah.
interweaving of all these systems." But again, you have to be, like, hooked somehow into, like, something that resonates, and for me, like, I found out, I think, initially in my first reading in, like, 2018 that I was a self-projected projector, and it
What's
that
your self-projected channel? I'm curious.
731.
Okay, cool.
Which is the leadership, yeah, it's kind of like
Yeah.
leading from behind and leading from within, and it's yeah, this very leadership-oriented channel, but, that lights up my G center. It's, yeah, I found out the word self-projected projector, and the strategy for that was to talk and then listen to myself talk, and that's how I will know what I believe. But if I just think it, or if I don't actually speak it through my throat, like from my heart to my throat, I will be confused, and I have found that to be so amazingly on point for me that, like, through storytelling, through podcasting, through having conversations with lots of different people, I am able to learn so much about myself and my place in the world and what I actually believe, and when I find that I retreat and don't speak things out through my throat channel. I don't get to the essence of what it is that I'm trying to convey nearly as quickly. And so that for me was like, whoa. And so that might explain like why I'm like doing the gates of the zodiac in a more storytelling kind of story arc way, because it's a way of like vocalizing, and why you're like putting it in a fractal of reflection. And yeah, that's totally cool to think about it. Love
Well, that it's like connecting some dots too of like when I like encounter people just in my field, just in general, there's how do I explain this? It's this perceptual participation thing, right? Like where your attention goes, there's usually some sort of like there's something there. And so for me, like through Leo season 731 being both activate like Leo activations, um, those are my Chiron placements. So I've been kind of like, well, what makes Chiron not like a like some systems do use it. And so like if we were in human design to attribute this kind of energetic quality, I would be a self-projected projector, right? Like should I experiment with this? And it the 7 and the 31 create my personality and design side
Chiron.
Chiron
Yeah.
place.
Oh,
And so
wow.
it's like this channel of like this I don't know, I'm still like really but I think, like, when I look at you, there's, like, a quality of leadership that I'm attentive towards, like, something that's, like, building up in me that I've, like, experienced a wound from childhood or, like, whatever, ways of, like, not being seen or, like, not speaking life into my work, and so that I'm glad you spoke to that because it
Mm.
also just kinda connected a dot of, like, why my attention goes to your work toward too, and, like, perhaps maybe what I'm, like, watching for and how I'm, like how we kind of are all medicine for one another and, some way or another.
Oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. Yeah, I do find that everyone that I have met with through this work and through this space there's been a very personal like connection where or people even that I give readings to, it'll be like they're bringing something to the table that I've been contemplating or a gate that's been so on my mind, and then it's like, whoa, that's something that is so connected. And that's
Mhm.
cool that you know that, yeah, that would make you a self-projected projector is the Chiron activation. And I feel like Chiron is more than any other celestial body is like a evolutionary one that, goes through different. I took a class a while back about the wounded healer and then the wounded and then the healer and then the alchemist. And like it's Chiron, I feel like is very alchemical as far as like learning about how to transmute your wounds into how you can serve and how you can help. And I'm fascinated. I actually also looked at my Chiron and saw it would make me a manifesting generator. If my Chiron, which is in 20, the gate of the now, both Chirons are in 20. And so it's like that
Interesting.
that would activate manifesting generator channel, I think 1020. And so
Okay.
I was fascinated by that too, because and that you first were like, "Are you a manifesting generator?" And I think I've been inspired by manifesting generators who seem to just be able to do everything. And
All of it,
I'm
yeah.
too tired. I'm just way too tired. All the I start things, I tell a good story, but sometimes I'm like, "I'm just tired."
Yeah.
So so having
Projector things.
yeah, projector things, I'm like, "I need to go sleep and rest and be alone." But with the 20 activated, which is now it's activated by Uranus, transiting Uranus is in my Chiron gate. And so like that is activating my manifesting generatorness through Uranus. And it's also my Uranus opposition, which is a big thing in astrology and human design for like a midlife transit. And that's happening now in Gemini as well.
How
So
how is like, what it is yeah, like, I'm curious if you wanna share, like, what that has been like for you.
it's very new. I mean, I feel like it's just, Uranus just dipped into Gemini and is going back into now retrograding starting this week. Uranus is going to be retrograding backward through that first degree of Gemini into Taurus for, until next. I believe February, maybe even May. It's for a little while back into Taurus and then back again. So I feel like I've gotten a little teaser of the Uranus opposition by sign and been like, okay, this is, I feel electrified and like things are massively going to be changing in my life, but almost like I don't know quite what it is yet. And having that Uranus also be, yeah, like having Chiron right at that degree, it's like definitely made me think a lot about Chiron and about how, I'm looking into my wounds a lot more and my, depths of shadows and the rotten things that have been in the cauldron and how to get them out if I need to start a whole new cauldron and just like pour it all out.
Yeah,
Like, okay, it's time to buy a new cauldron and like from Walmart and just start whatever,
yeah.
like forge a new one. And so all this talk about cauldrons that you've been, hinting at is and how that's tied in with the apple cider and all of that is really fascinating because it feels very top of mind for me right now as far as like I feel like this Uranus opposition on my Chiron is like very much making me look at my past and look at the ancestral traumas, the ancestral gifts, like all of the things going way, way back that I've like continued to just like stoke the fire on that cauldron for a long time because it's what I've known. And I feel like right now with this transit happening or starting to happen, there's a bit of a sense of like, I can't keep doing that. I can't keep stoking other people's fires or like my ancestral lineage or like the composts, like just keep putting more into that cauldron, assuming that it'll get more purified because it's already kind of a certain type of soup. And I think there is a certain like control alt delete quality to like, all right, I have to just, it's not about releasing completely the ties to the past, but there is a certain energy of like, you're your own, you can start fresh. You can bring your own energy to the table and really owning that and taking action. So I feel excited by it. And also, there's a lot to sort through. And it takes a lot to knock a cauldron over that's like generations in the making when you start to see it that way. You just, like, kick it down, you're like, "Oh," or maybe just, like, leave and start my own camp. I don't
You're like,
know. How do
"Oh,
you
this
do
thing's really heavy, I can't kick it over."
Yeah, yeah. So it's
Yeah.
like, alright, how do we ladle it out one spoon at a time, or do we, what is the methodology? And that's the thing that I'm wanting to know the answer to, wanting to have some illumination on and really leaning into this 63, 64 kind of focus time as, like, how can I get illumination without, like, feeling like I have to check off a bunch of spreadsheet cells to, like, get there, but actually just, like, wait and have it kind of whatever's in that liminal come to the surface on its own or, like, ripen on its own, but it feels the tension is palpable, like, in the
Ye
air. It's like, that electricity before a storm,
yeah.
where it's like, "Ooh." Yeah.
Uranus kind of feels like that, like a lightning bolt, like that static electricity. Yeah, there's like a sort of charge behind Uranus that feels like that in my world. So I would be so curious to keep up with you and hear how that all evolves because
Yeah.
that's a big one. Yeah.
It is a big one. Yeah, I've been working with some people lately surrounding their Saturn returns, and I think most people know about Saturn return as a major transit in life around 27 to 30, but, like, the midlife transits aren't as well like, there's certain people that do amazing work with them, but, I don't think I ever knew about there's, like, Pluto square, then there's Neptune square, your natal Neptune, and then there's Uranus opposition, and all of these kind of happen in from like mid late 30s into early 40s, and it's a journey. It's amazing. It's an alchemical transmutative plutonic process. You started with me with the Pluto square, which was yeah, major upheaval in the same degree as like my Saturn return was. And so it's like just working through and now reaching the Uranus one feels like cathartic and kind of maybe even fun, but also the scariest because it's like so unknown and so like lightning bolt energy. So it's like it's almost like anything could happen. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like, Ra I think Ra always I'm trying to think back to some of the lectures that he had on the Uranus opposition that we live in it's been so long since I visited this material, but that we are now living life cycles that are Uranian in nature, meaning that, like, and so I think a lot of, like, what he talked about was that true maturation is, like, becoming an adult now. Before, I can't remember what our life cycles were before Uranian. Were they
Oh,
Saturnian? That's
Saturnian,
where, like,
yeah.
we
Yeah.
evolved from, which was, like, much shorter. You were an adult by the time you were, like, in your 20s, and, like, you went on and had shorter life cycles. Now they're longer. So, like, really an adult isn't an adult until later 30s, 40s. Like, there's a whole longer process to maturation because our life cycles are much longer now too. And so, yeah, that's what it was making me think of when you're speaking to that, and, like, how I remember reading those materials and thinking, "Wow, that's quite an upgrade to the way we can understand ourselves in context of community and jobs and society that is so outdated from, like," we're still operating under this whole, like, 8 you're an adult when you're 18 years old. Now you need to know what you need to, like, go out into the world and do, and actually it takes so much longer to, like, even figure out that full maturation of who you are and what you wanna do, and anyway, so that's what
Yeah. That's so cool. Thank
yeah.
you for sharing that. I don't think I've listened to that lecture, but,
Oh,
I love that because I mean, yeah, Uranus takes 84 years to orbit the sun, so 84 years around the zodiac. So 42-ish is the opposition time when it's, like, halfway around, and so I think a lot of us are living to 84 these days. Probably the average global lifespan is, like, a little bit less than that, but it's around there, and when
mhm,
we think of, like, majority of human history, it was, like, 35 totally,
mhm,
where it's like if you get to Saturn return, you're like, that's your old age, which is so crazy to think about how
mhm,
quickly that's changed. But it makes a lot of sense how we're, yeah, the Uranian age. That's cool. I like that.
mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you. We've been talking on so many beautiful tangents. I'd love to know just to backtrack a little bit, like how you got into human design in the first place, just the genesis of that.
I was at It was the year 2017. Wait, was it? Wait, let me think. Yeah, I think I found human design, or human design found me in 2017 on, like, some influencery type podcast. The Balanced Blonde was her name, and she had Jenna Zoe on her podcast, and she also this influencer is a reflector herself, and so Jenna Zoe's talking to her about it and telling her, and I'm, like, driving down the highway, and I'm like, it's just all kind of clicking, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I have to know about this." Like, I know that I'm a reflector, and they're telling she's using all of the lingo that's, like, the percentages and all of that, and I'm still, like, convinced. So I pull over on the side of the highway because 'cause I'm just like, I'm jumping out of my skin, and I type in the information, and sure enough, like, I'm a reflector anyway. Like, my mom's like, "I think you're born at 1:15 or 1:45, I'm not sure, but either way you cut it, still a reflector." So, I just really it really fascinated me. It felt like this point in my life, that was I think it was a very defining point in my life. I think everybody in human design talks about it in some way or another. You listen to human design podcasts, and they're gonna talk about where did human design find you? Because the way that I see human design is this is like it's upgraded technology that we haven't even begun to like understand. Like it is still working upon us. It's quantum in nature. It's talking about the fifth dimension. And so yeah, I listened to this podcast, and then I went and I was like scourging the internet, like how can I like find anything on this at the time? Still it was starting to trickle in, but very slowly. There was some big accounts, but not much information. And then I did the IHDS like prerequisite. They have like 3 different prerequisite classes, and I became pretty quickly disenchanted with that system, very quickly. I think it was when they told me that all the projectors got 20% off, and I was like, "That's a marketing scheme."
Yeah, yeah,
I wanted
there's money involved in this, yeah,
yeah,
I know, it
you
turned me
know?
off just the amount of paywalls initially, I was like, "Ooh, this is fascinating," and then it was like, "You have to pay for this and this and this and this," and I was like, "This is come on." Like,
Yeah,
really? It just felt like not like and like it would lead you in and with a breadcrumb and then be like, "Oh, and now to get more," and, of course, we live in
yeah.
capitalism, but yeah, that's interesting. It was that really the disenchantment was surrounding the
It was
financial
like
part, or
it was yes, it was just one of the first things that was, like, in misalignment, and then I was taking the courses at the same time, and also like, we can't really tell you much about yourself, that you're a reflector, and there's there's no definition there, so there's nothing that I can really tell you how to work with that. Go check out the moon. And so started checking out the moon. I was like, "Okay, what is this?" Like, I'll just read the definitive book of human design. I'll watch as the moon goes around. And then about um 3 years into my experiment, I I had a I had my first child in 2019. So I kind of dabbled with human design, knew of it, was like curious, taking classes. And then I had my first baby and just got sucked into new momhood. And, when my second baby came around, I started becoming really, like there was, like, this creative fire that was building inside of me. This was also right around my Saturn return, and so it was like, I know this information can tell me something, but it wasn't. It wasn't. You go in I realized really quickly that it was about defining things and keynoting them and, like, putting them in their compartments and setting them down and, like, now you know. But the thing that was ringing in my mind was that Ra kept saying it was an experiment. So, okay, how do we experiment with this? And so I think since about 3, 4 years into my experiment, I was really initiated into my own self-experiment, which is a friend sent me, like, the mega file, and so I have all the access to all this information, and so have just gone down my own pathway of, like, what is the valuable information? What is this thing saying? And I think one of the most transformative moments for me in understanding it was reading The Black Book, which is one of the very first books that was ever written on the human design system. And I was like, "Okay, this is good.
Mm,
There's something here.
mm,
This is good." So it really re-engaged me. I used the term restoring the rootstock at the very beginning of the episode, and that has been kind of my process with it. The experiment that is restoring the rootstock of all these ancient wisdoms that have come together to help us. To me, the way human design is presented in this very closed system, patriarchal, colonial sort of way. Let's define it. It's linear. There's not a lot of nuance here. You are what you are. And what I started seeing beneath the surface was the diversity of differentiation, and that it's not about just seeing yourself, it's about seeing yourself in connection to your ecosystem and your reality and how it's all open, it's all permeable, and it's all relative. And so yeah,
mm.
that's been my process with it. And now I'm in a part of my life where I feel like I'm having a lot of, like, people call it an ego death, but I think it's more of an ego refinement where I'm kind of I don't believe in ego death. Our ego is a very important part of us, but I'm starting to understand the role that it plays in my life as a way to inform me about myself and perhaps the way I'm connected to the nature of my reality. So, it's always changing shape.
I
I'm
love
always like, "I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just, like, out here experimenting and having fun."
But you're doing I mean, you're putting
Yeah,
yourself out there, you're doing a lot, you're publicly you're presenting and you're yeah, it's like throwing a spaghetti against the wall, and that is what it's all about, like, the experiment got me as well, being like, "This is the experiment," and it felt a little bit I remember initially being like, "How long have you been in the experiment?" It felt a little too like, "Whoa, this is like is that like a password to get into, like, the underground whatever?"
it is.
But truly, like, the experiment I mean, experimenting with something yeah, I guess when I think about it, that's what on doing here too, is that I couldn't accept just getting the knowledge and packaging it. And I studied with Karen Curry Parker, who does quantum human design, this kind of a spin-off, and she had worked with Ra and then kind of spun off and created her own types that had a little bit more of maybe like a positive, she's like words are spells, and so talking about an orchestrator rather than a projector, or there's different terminology for the gates and for the types. Similar system, and I liked it. It's kind of my first foray deep dive into human design, but I also felt even within that, it was a lot of emphasis on it was just coachy. It was like, "Okay, well, how can we help people in a more, like, business sense?" It was very business oriented of like, yeah, you can, like, talk to people about what they are, what their types are, and what their centers are activated, and boom, help them in this way, and being the 64, was like, "Wait, I need to know the" and a one line, I was like, "I need to know the root of this," like, and I couldn't find information anywhere about, like, how the order of the gates came to be, and I think that was the thing for me where I was like, I need to find out, like, how come no one in the human design space" I went to conferences, I, like, asked people who were experts or, in this field and
Yeah.
gurus or whatever, and I was like and they're like, "It's just the voice, it's what the voice said." And it took me a whole year, I think, to find out that it was the Fuxi sequence of the I Ching. It's an established sequence that's not 1, 2, 3, 4 through 64. It's the order that we see on the mandala around the zodiac. But for me, I was like, if I'm gonna get into this, it started to feel resonant and relevant for me. Like, I loved what was coming of it, but without getting that baseline, like, "Just tell me where these numbers like, where this order came from," and the amount of "I don't knows" that came from people who were deep into it, I was like, "Come on, guys, this is, like, the basis of the system,"
Yeah.
like, "Can we just
Yeah.
please somebody?" And then finally, it was my own research and my own experimenting of, like, diving into I Ching and, like, "Okay, let's look at these binary codes, let's look at, like, the history of this beautiful ancient Chinese system," and then being like, "Oh, no, this is, like, this original sequence that" there's the King 1 sequence, which is 1 through 64, and that's the divination sequence that's used, but then the Fuxi was supposed to be the one that was, like, delivered on the back of a turtle to this ancient, like, first mythological first emperor of China who named Fuxi, who was, like, receiving the download of these cycles of time in this way, and so when that clicked and I finally had a little bit of, like, roots for that through experimenting, then I was like, "Oh, now I have to experiment with it in my own life on like a week by week, day to day basis, similarly to how you've done." And I think that it's been profound. And like you said, fifth dimensional quantum, like profound. But I've still found it hard for myself. Like when I think about marketing, I'm like, do I call myself a human design guide? Even though, because I know that that would actually reach more people because it is what I'm working with. But I've had this resistance to labeling myself as such. But that makes it harder to reach people that might benefit or might be a good person to have a conversation with, right? So
Yeah.
I'm curious how you've yeah, it seems like you've grappled with that as well, like a little bit of like, do I call myself this? Do I label myself that? Like, what is this thing? What is this, ethereal, beautiful magic that we're working with without labeling it and pigeonholing? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's been, I think, one of the primary tensions of, like, my whole experiment with finding this information. Actually, I do have to say, like, you're scouring the internet trying to find, like, the sequencing, and when I connected with you, I had asked the same question for probably years and, like, thought like, for me, a lot of, like, the information that I how I know I'm supposed to be engaging with information is that it comes to me serendipitously and, like, with ease. So if I'm, like, scouring too hard and, like, researching and investigating too hard, it's really not good for my system. I remember I, like, had this little inspiration I reached out to, and you were like, "Oh, yeah, it's the Fuxi," or however you say it, and I went and, like, I found this really cool article that explained what that was, that it was a binary code, and I was like, "Wait, this is I use, like, this terminology a lot because I think it really does it really holds the sort of weight that this kind of information can give us. It's technology, and, like, it was advanced even then for them to understand binary code.
Mhm.
Like back then it kind of like blew my mind when I started understanding like the way that anyway, so that I just have to give we haven't gotten to talk live yet, but that was a huge illumination personally for me and something I had been like trying to figure out for years and like just randomly reach out to you and you say it like it's air, like it's, "Oh, yeah, here," like, because you had already gone through your own investigative process, and it clicked in so much for me, and I think honestly that's also when there's always been this, like, fire that I haven't understood, but that's really a moment where I was like, "Oh, okay, so there is something here to, like, follow this process," and kind of furthered me into kind of understanding it. But yeah, I've been grappling with the same question, like, how do we talk about these things and engage with it on the internet, in real life, in ways that are accessible and digestible, but also, like, not too heavy, but also not but also, like, contains how important I think this information is, and so, yeah. The answer is yes, I've grappled with it, and there's no answer because human design doesn't feel quite it, but is the most recent iteration of what has been provided. I think the nine-centered body graph kind of back speaking to when human design found me, I think that there is something that occurs when we're talking about perceptual participation and a lot of how as human beings we've evolved to inform ourselves and be participants with our life is through our eyes, what we see. And I think when we lay eyes, like literally something happens when we look at this nine-centered body graph that it activates a new level of intelligence that is already a part of us. And I talk about this all the time. Like, this is not something that isn't in our grasp. Like, even when Ra talks a little bit, like, oh, the unconscious red lines design side, you don't need to worry about that because it's working on its own. No, this is big stuff that we are given access to, the unconscious that we came here to know.
Mhm.
And, that's the quantum, and that's the fifth dimension, and that's human
Mm.
design. So anyway, yeah.
That's so fascinating. The visual, yeah, the visual. I mean, for me, I had brunch with a friend, and I think it was early 2019, and I had just had my only child, a couple months before that, and I was in a very receptive space, and also very in touch with my body because giving birth is a really embodied thing, and being pregnant, like you can't ignore it. I think I ignored my body for a lot of my life, and then pregnancy and childbirth and being a new mom was like, "Whoa, my body." And then right after that, I had brunch with a friend, and she brought a body graph. I was like, "Have you ever heard of human design?" I was like, "No." But I saw the body graph, and I was like, "Ooh." And I think if she had just explained it, I would have been like, "That sounds like a white guy put together a whole bunch of, like, beautiful systems and called it something else and is trying to sell it." And I would have been like, "Never
Yeah,
gonna look at that." Like, it's
yeah,
just wasn't in my radar. Like, cool, sure, but I had
yeah.
been fascinated by all of the different systems too, so as she explained it, as I was looking visually at this thing that was something that I was recently so much more connected to than ever before, like, and feeling, okay, yeah, the I'd been learning about the chakra centers and, like, the tree of life and Kabbalah and, like, all of it, it was, like, just the visual intake sucked me in, and I'd, like, put that on my wall. I was like, "This is cool." The visual, yeah, so
Similarly to you, I feel like a part of this that I, like, failed to forget is, like, some of my background isn't some part of my background is in energy healing. Like, have trained in Reiki. Just a practice that I, like, use for myself, I use for my family. Is something that I'm proficient in. I wouldn't even call it Reiki anymore at this point. It's my own energetic practice and understanding of the world. And to this kind of point of like seeing the body graph and understanding the chakras is like, oh, these are a part of us. It's like, for you, it's like being very tapped into the body and attuned to it. It is that these are not just contemplations that are like existing somewhere etherically out there it's, like, literally a part of us, and when I saw like, having that kind of understanding of energetic systems beforehand and then seeing it, I was like, "That's how it moves." Like, that's how it moves through the system, and so even when I give readings to people like friends and, I'm not offering any right now, but it's like the circuitry is, like, really one of the, like, one of the structure what's the word I wanna look for? It's something that I hyper focus on that I think was kind of the voice's main instruction that gave us, like, the meat and potatoes of what we should be looking at, so, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, because that's something that is not in another the way that these gates and these hexagrams of the I Ching, that was a sequence that was predetermined, right? The zodiac is these the way the mandala works, it's kind of like, "Oh, yeah, that is based on the fusion of ancient systems." But the body graph was the innovation, really, right? Like, there's not another system that put these gates into those specific places within this nine-centered body being of these that is very much the innovative piece of it, and I think for that reason is, like, I haven't dived into that as much, and I love listening to your podcast and just when you speak because it is very circuitry based, and I'd love if you could, we'll wrap up here pretty soon, but I'd love if you could just explain, like, what circuitry is for people listening. I feel like I probably have listeners who are more like understand astrology and kind of like the planets as they orbit, but I don't talk as much about the body graph or the circuitry or the centers because I started off on the kind of through the transits, but I foresee a lot of future collaborations or just learning more from you, but since you came in from another avenue that and I did, and we're kind of meeting in the middle here, but
Yeah.
yeah, what is circuitry, I guess?
So if you were to look at the body graph, you have, this kind of being that's sitting cross-legged on the ground, you presume, and you have 9 centers, and they're all connected by these lines. So from each center, there's a gate, a series of gates that connects to another gate of another center. And these are electromagnetically connected to one another. So if, like, even just you think like, for me, when I was contemplating it, I'm like, "Circuitry, it's an open system. It's all moving energy throughout the body." And so inside of this system of circuitry in the body graph, we have different types of circuitry. We have the integration circuit, we have the tribal circuit, we have individual, and we have collective. And in the way that I talk about it, and I think I'm still like circling what it is that I need to hone into, and I feel like this conversation is really helping me, is that these are orientations to the way the energy that's a part of us is inside of us. The planets kind of activate that certain point in our body of our circuitry, and they open up a circuit of expression, of energetic expression inside of the body in a very particular point in the body graph. And then you can kind of add on top of it the integration circuit is going to be indicative of energy that is involuting. It's focused and oriented in an internal process, whereas and this is the way that I see it. So our integration circuit and our individual circuitry, these are activations in the body graph that are internally oriented, and tribal and collective circuitry is externally oriented. They're still all a part of us. It's just a different way that the energy interacts with your body and with the way that you're connected to your reality. And so it just gives it a little bit in that way you can see, like, I'm really focused on how the energy is informing the body and moving through us and expressing through us and ties into, like, our auric presence in the world, and so, yeah, that's a little bit on circuitry. It's a lot more kind of involved, but yeah.
Thank you so much for that explanation. I think,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like the layers in which we learn these different systems. For me, with human design, I remember hearing about that and being like, I'm going to put that on hold. And
Yeah.
recently, I'm like, but I'll put that over there until I understand gates. And then, okay, gates become channels, and then channels become circuit, or like they're all part of this system. It's like
Mhm.
beautiful system. And recently, I've gotten really into when I was making this deck, I initially didn't include the circuitry of each gate on the deck because I was like, "Eh, that's not needed." And then the more I thought about it, how you could put them together, I was like, it's absolutely a fundamental piece of the human design system and how all of these gates tie together. And I love that you mentioned the internal versus like ecosystem or like external relating kind of way. Like tribal and collective makes sense. We're relating to the immediate tribe or to the greater collective of humanity, and then the individual and integration being like, how do we, as sovereign beings, bring that into ourselves? And yeah, it's really cool. I'm excited to learn more and dive deeper into the how that all interconnects. But do you feel like the deeper you go with this, the more, do you actually feel it in your body? Like, or is it a mental framework, or are you able to like feel certain, like, areas of your body or centers, energy centers where the gates or the transits are showing up? I'm just curious.
I feel like that is the way that I've come to understand it is, like, through my body. I think a lot of my confusion in life and I do think it's maybe perhaps a reflector thing, and I think it can also be a non-sacral, like, where we don't have consistent sacral activation. There is just more kind of sensitivity to, like, bodily sensation perhaps that kind of inferred from the outside world and not happening from, like, internal out into the world, and so I think it's been confusing for me because that is how I, like, inform myself is like, "Wait, this thing is happening in here, what is it related to?"
Mm.
And so, it is usually always happening first for me, and when I started following this kind of sequence, I was starting to be able to, like, track I deal with my own thyroid issues, and that's a really kind of, like that's a sensitive line to touch. I've always been massively fascinated by medical astrology and like energetic healing modalities and things like that. So yeah, I've always kind of felt I can feel Virgo and I can feel Leo and I can understand that, but it's been the hard part about it is like translating it into words, like getting it out of like I feel it. How do I get it out of there? And I think that's a lot of my Sun Mercury conjunct stuff is like translating, the literal physical experience of it.
Wow, that's so cool. I mean, having all the open centers and feeling, I mean, reflectors are experiencing activations of the circuitry through the lunar cycle and through all the planetary cycles, right?
Mhm,
That's how you're getting your chart activated. So that's so cool. For me, like having I have a defined head, ajna, G center, kind of heart, and throat. And so it's just all this top channel here, which is like
mhm,
storytelling, talking, identity, and thinking. Definitely lots of thinking and kind of like that third eye type knowing, but
mhm,
everything else is undefined for me. And so because of that definition, it has felt a little bit, off kilter sometimes where I now pay attention to the transits as they activate my emotional solar plexus or my sacral or my spleen, and I'm like, "Oh, these embodied ways of knowing are beautiful and awesome, and they're not consistent for me, so they weren't what I've worked with throughout my life."
mhm.
And coming into a more embodied place through actively trying to do it has been just so profound. And so, yeah, it's cool to presence that because I do think this can feel like a very mental game. I mean, there's so many words, there's so many descriptors, there's so many things, and but really it's all about, and human design is all about the body, like experimenting with how we interface with the world through more than just our conceptual understanding of it. And so the way that you're bringing that in and actually do feel, I can tell, I can sense in your transmissions when you speak that you are feeling it and not just reading about it and then regurgitating it back out. So that's super super awesome. Yeah.
So thank you. Yeah, I'm glad that that is, like, the thing being conveyed even though sometimes I'm like, "Wait, am I getting too mental?" There's a lot of pressure, right? That 64, 63. It's like this kind of constant pressure. But there's I think the awareness centers are such a beautiful teaching in and of itself. Like, if there was I often want to tell people to, like, focus on the awareness centers as an entry point into human design because when we can explore and understand our ways of knowing in these I often call it the Holy Trinity. there's more of a holistic way of, like, looking at how we, like, include information that's valuable into our life, like, not only ajna mental knowings, but, like, what is the solar plexus knowing? What is a splenic knowing? And then, like, seeing how these are the ways in which we are connected to awareness and interacting with consciousness in the world, and so, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I love that, the Holy Trinity. That it is, yeah, like a
Mhm.
triangle in the body graph. That's so cool.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Nice. Awesome. Well, I usually talk about both of the gates, or if there are 2 gates that the sun is transiting through in a week on the podcast, and since I'm not gonna really add on much more to this, I'd love if you have any insights, just super quick, like a little illuminating glimpse into the 47, which is after the 64 this week, and that 63, 64, Pisces Virgo axis eclipse, the sun's moving into gate 47, which is the next Virgo gate of realization. So I don't know, just if you have anything, if you don't, totally fine. But if you're so good at distilling the essence of things, I thought we could kind of end with that. There'll be a Mercury Cazimi happening in gate 47 this week, which is when the Mercury is in the heart of the sun. And sounds like you have that in your birth chart. You have Mercury conjunct the sun. And so just thought it would be nice to ask you about, uh, you can either talk about Mercury Cazimi and what that feels like for you, or Mercury conjunct Sun, or 47, just a little illuminating glimpse.
What do I wanna say about 47? I think in the Gene Keys, 47 is the shadow of oppression. So, I'll show you a little way that I, like, work with the circuitry here. So, like, 47 is a part of the collective understanding circuit, which is different than the collective abstract circuitry. They're kind of similar orientations, but they're connected and rooted in different awarenesses and knowings. 47 is connected to splenic awareness, which really speaks to like logic and linear knowing and intuition and deep rooted trust. It's oriented towards like the future, and I think oftentimes in the collective understanding circuit, there can be a hyper emphasis on linearity just in like period, like projecting into the future and planning it out. And I see how things are going to go, and this is what it is. But on the flip side of that, it can be deeply intuitive. Like the spleen is our this place of deep ancestral knowing, what has been before us that has proven continuity is timeless, like, always works. There are certain patterns that always work in time, and so I think 47 can really present this way in which there is an emergent quality of intelligence and ways of thinking that don't oppress and stifle and stagnate energy in the body. So, oppression to me, like the shadow of oppression to me simply means like ways that we like conflate or like stifle and stagnate and keep boxed in. And so I think if you're listening to this on the verge of 47, I think like the ways in which to interact with that energy could be simply like keeping your mind open and this kind of uh similarly to the 64 imagination, like allowing yourself to be shown new emergent patterns that you might not have otherwise considered, that are intuitive and you don't know where they come from, but they are necessarily good and valuable.
Mm.
So, that's what
Oh,
I'd say about 47.
thank you so much for that. That's a
Yeah.
beautiful, beautiful interpretation. Yeah, the linearity of oppression when you're focused on such like a linear path towards truth. It's interesting. I mean, 47 connects to 64 in the body graph,
Mhm.
right? Which is interesting because you have the 64 in the middle of Virgo season, imagination, confusion, then going into realization. That's not that common where the body graph has a connection and then it's like one right after another in the mandala. And
Mhm.
so I thought that was an interesting thing where it's kind of like, yeah, moving from confusion to realization, like seeking answers, seeking clarity, but within both, it's about that, needing to kind of wait for something to become real, to realize on its own, like ripen in the way that, tying it back to the harvest goddess of Virgo
Virgo, it's, yeah, this, like, ripening process rather than forcing
Mhm.
an answer maybe before it's due.
I love that. It's reminding me that of, like, another point kind of that I think is so different than the way that we imagine the ajna is, like, we get really tied up in this, like, yeah, like, mental energy, but the ajna is also the home of the design crystal, which is like, our unconscious patterning. It's, like, all of the codes to the body, like, what lies beneath. So I think that there's, like there I might not be able to wrap my words around it, but I think that, this, like, pressure of seeking the answer that a lot of times, like, the answers to every question is already, like, within you, within the body and the present moment, and, like, that, like, that is that emergent quality that encaptures realizations. I don't know how it
Totally, totally. Yeah, that's I was just thinking about it, having a Mercury cazimi like this, it's supposed to be this moment of clarity, like mental clarity, kind of like the sun is illuminating and providing a throne for Mercury to sit on in a Mercury cazimi. But before and after the cazimi, which is this exact moment, the Mercury would be known as combust, which is like
Mhm.
it's kind of like on the sides of the throne where it's kind of being overshadowed by the sun's energy. So it's almost like you go from this period of confusion, or just like being overwhelmed by like solar power into like that like illuminating moment and then back out again. And so if that feels perfect for realization to like, yeah,
Yeah.
how it comes through is like it's gonna, yeah, distill into something coming from like it's not there yet and then bing, there's like this moment of clarity.
Like this channel, like, it's like the opening of the channel, and it's like it's not forever. It's this moment of time, and you collect what it is that's showing itself and trust that, like, that's the thing that I needed.
Right.
That was the realization. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that so much.
Oh my gosh, and I know that we have far gone over time. I mean, this has been so fun. I did not doubt that we would be talking and have plenty to talk about, so it's been really lovely. I am so stoked that we got to have this conversation. I hope that we can have more. Like, I love the synergy of, like, what you're bringing with the circuitry and the storytelling, and so thank you so much for spending some time with me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been a joy.